A nutrition expert with a PhD from the University of Toronto, she is a Vanier Scholar whose research has been published in prestigious medical journals and has also helped influence public policy at City Hall and Queen's Park. She is devoted to spreading the word about the importance of eating well as a means to live optimally. She has been featured on CBC, both television and radio, CTV, CP24, and TVO, and is currently working towards becoming a physician nutritionist. Please join me in a warm welcome for Dr. Mary Scorbatakos.
Thank you. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a great pleasure and honor for me to be here today to share with you some information about healthy eating and food, and I hope that I'll inspire you all to eat a little healthier after today's presentation. I want to begin today by talking about Popeye the Sailor. So everyone's probably heard of Popeye before. He's famous for eating spinach, of course, and whenever Popeye eats spinach, his muscles immediately burst out and he becomes superhuman and can defeat whoever's causing him any kind of trouble. And in the comic strip, Popeye explains that the reason he eats vitamin A is because vitamin A makes humans healthy, strong and healthy. Now Popeye is sort of right here. Let me explain. Spinach contains something called beta-carotene. And when we eat beta-carotene, our body converts it to vitamin A. So far, Popeye's right. Spinach contains vitamin A. And in fact, just 1 cup of spinach will give you your entire day's worth of vitamin A. And that's a good thing because vitamin A is an important antioxidant. It's also associated with decreased risk for heart disease and cancer. And it's also, I call it the skin vitamin, because whether you're looking for anti-aging benefits or clear skin, vitamin A is a nutrient for you. But there's a problem. And the problem is that if you eat, the problem is our bodies are not very good at absorbing vitamin A. So I have a quiz question for all of you. When you eat when you eat spinach, how much of the vitamin A in that spinach do you think that you absorb? Raise your hand if you think you absorb 5%. Raise your hand if you think you absorb 25%. And raise your hand if you think you absorb 45%. All right, so the answer is 5%. That's it. That cup had a day's worth, but you're only going to get 5% of the amount that's in there. So in reality, you'd have to eat 20 cups of spinach in order to get your day's worth of vitamin A. But the reason I'm telling you this story is because there's good news. You don't have to eat 20 cups of spinach to get your day's worth of vitamin A. And to explain why, there's an interesting connection within the Popeye story. So Popeye's girlfriend is olive oil. Now olive oil came from a family where everyone was named after some kind of oil. Her brother was castor oil, her mother was banana oil, and she of course was named after olive oil. And the reason this is an interesting coincidence is because what helps your body to absorb vitamin A better? Oil. So it's really interesting that Popeye loved both spinach, which contains vitamin A, and he loved oil, so olive oil, two things that are clearly meant to be together. So this was demonstrated in a study where they fed people 2 salads. Some people ate that salad with no fat dressing, and then they ate the exact same salad with regular dressing. And when they ate that salad with regular dressing, they actually absorbed 40 times more beta-carotene. So don't be foolish. I used to eat salads with no dressing thinking that that was a good dieting technique, less calories, this is better for me. Not a good idea. It's totally fine to put a little bit of dressing on your salad. And the amount that you need in order to absorb your beta-carotene and your vitamin A is about 1 teaspoon for every cup of vegetables. And it doesn't have to be oil, it can be butter, it can be salad dressing. Any kind of fat is going to accomplish the task of helping your body to absorb those nutrients that you want. Now beyond adding oil, there are other things you can also do to increase nutrient absorption. One is cooking. So when you cook leafy greens or vegetables, you do some of the digestive work for your body and you liberate some of those nutrients, so that increases absorption as well. And the other thing you can do is cutting, mashing, pureeing. Again, you're doing some of the digestive work for your body, getting more nutrients out of there. So if you cook your spinach and you puree it and you combine it with oil, you're going to get the most out of it. So the moral of the story is, always combine your vegetables with fat. Now back to Popeye for a second. Popeye, of course, is noted for this superhuman strength. Is there any truth whatsoever in this concept? Well, spinach also contains something called nitrates. And research has shown that nitrates actually help your muscles to take up oxygen. And in doing so, there has been some research to suggest that when you consume a diet high in nitrates or drink things like beet juice, it actually has endurance benefits. So if you're looking for some sort of performance enhancing capabilities from spinach, it probably won't make your muscles giant, but it could have some endurance benefits. So Popeye, he was on the right track. He was definitely helping people out with that eat spinach message. All right, now we're gonna change gears slightly, and I wanna talk about a different segment called, Can You Trust a Food Label? And I'd like to start by telling a little story about something that this actually happened to me. I was walking down Yonge Street one day, and someone was handing out free samples of a new product. So I said, sure, I'll take it. So they handed me this veggie-based, non-dairy beverage. I looked and I thought, might as well try it. Claimed to be unsweetened, again, veggie-based, non-dairy product. I have crossed out the name because my purpose in telling this story is not to name and shade one particular brand or product, but rather to use this as an example of a larger issue. So I took this product home, poured myself a glass, and I tried it. And despite the fact that the label says unsweetened, it tasted incredibly sweet. And I thought, are there artificial sweeteners? No. When I looked at the nutrition facts table, this is the actual nutrition facts table, it claimed to have 0 grams of sugar. So I thought, what's going on here? So I took a look at the ingredients list. And the ingredients list is at the top, and I've highlighted for you the first 2 ingredients. So the first thing is filtered water. Okay, that's pretty standard. The second ingredient is this so-called proprietary vegetable blend. And when you look at the so-called proprietary vegetable blend, there's a few things in it. There's pea protein, tapioca starch, potato starch, protease, and amylase. Let me break that down for you. In this so-called proprietary vegetable blend, we have starches. Think of starches as being a chain of sugar molecules, okay? And the other thing that we have in there is we have enzymes. And enzymes are scissors that cut up starches. So when you put in a chain of sugar molecules and some scissors that cut up that chain, what do we really have in that proprietary vegetable blend?
Sugar.
It's basically just sugar. So that shows you how a product can call itself unsweetened. It can say it contains 0 grams of sugar, when in fact, it's got a lot of sugar in it. So the moral of this, so in fact the ingredient list probably should have looked like this. Water, sugar. Or perhaps maybe even sugar would have been number 1. But the moral of the story is, if something tastes too good to be true, it probably is. All right, changing gears again. This next segment is one of my favorites. It's called, Can You Make Unhealthy Foods Healthier? Because we all know and love to eat unhealthy foods. There's nothing wrong with treating ourselves once in a while, but there are some things that we can do to lessen the impact of these foods on our health. Let's start with something that I think most of us all know and love, white bread, right? The texture, the taste, it's just, I don't know, I love white bread. You guys white bread fans out there? Yeah, we all know and love white bread, right? And we all also know that it's not the best thing for us. And the problem with white bread is the effect that it has on our blood sugar. So when we eat white bread, it gets digested very quickly. It doesn't spend much time in our stomach. And I'm going to show you in the red line what our blood sugar level looks like when we eat it. So we're stable, we eat it, what happens immediately after?
Spikes.
Our blood sugar level spikes right up. And we feel great, right? This is the good phase. But then our body has to retaliate, take care of the situation. What happens next? Ooh, it comes right down. And then we don't feel so great, right? And then eventually we recalibrate. But this spike, it increases your risk for weight gain. It increases your risk for things like diabetes. And in that little downfall, it increases risk for things like anxiety, aggression, that sort of thing. So this isn't ideal. We don't want this to be happening in our body on a regular basis or a couple times a day, as it could be. So what can we do with our white bread to make it healthier for us? Well, when you go to an Italian restaurant, what is the white bread often served alongside? Yeah?
Oil.
Yeah. A little bit of a mini theme. no bias here, but it's true. You often see bread served with oil. And again, if you're diet conscious, if you're trying to lose weight, you're probably going to say, oh, I'm not going to dip my bread in that oil. So many extra calories, I wouldn't want that. But in fact, when you combine the bread with the oil, you make the digestive work a little harder for your body. And you actually slow down the rate at which the sugars in that bread get absorbed because your food spends more time in your stomach. And what happens? You get more of a gentle rise of blood sugar and a gentle fall, and you feel better, right? Yeah. So that's one thing you can do. But white bread is also often served with balsamic vinaigrette. Could there be something more to this combination of foods? In fact, there is. When you combine carbohydrates with acid, again, the acid slows down the rate of digestion. The food spends more time in your stomach. You get more of a gentle rise and gentle fall, which we like to see. So when you want to enjoy your white bread, don't feel guilty about dipping into that olive oil or that balsamic vinaigrette. It's actually better for you. Okay, pasta. Now, again, I'm a little biased here. I don't think pasta is an unhealthy food. I think it depends on how you make it and what you eat it with and how much you eat. That's probably one of the biggest considerations. But there are things you can do to make pasta healthier. Now in this case, how do you make pasta healthier? Well, it all depends on how you cook it. So if you go over to Italy and you order a dish of pasta, you might notice that the pasta has more bite to it. It's a little more chewy. And the reason is because they cook it what's called al dente. And al dente means it's cooked for a shorter amount of time. And again, when you cook your pasta al dente, you're kind of saving some of the digestive work for your body. When you cook it overdone, you've heated that thing up, you've torn it apart inside molecularly. Your body doesn't have much digestive work to do. When you cook it a little less, you save some of the work for your body to do. As a result, the pasta spends more time in your stomach, digest it more slowly, you get the more ideal gentle rise and gentle fall. So pasta al dente with a little bit of a bite to it is healthier for you than regularly cooked pasta. Okay. Barbecued and processed meat. This is one that I'm guessing there's some barbecued and processed meat lovers in the audience. Woo! Yeah, a few, yeah. So a couple years ago, I think in about 2015, the WHO came out with some guidelines and told us that this processed and barbecued meat cause cancer. So that's not such a good day for the processed and barbecued meat lovers. But when you see a headline like this, there's a few ways I think you can respond to it. You can either decide to completely ignore it and say, I'm just going to keep eating it. Or you can say, okay, I'll eat it less often. Or you can just take it out of your diet entirely. But what I like to do is I like to think, how can we tailor the rest of our diet to minimize the effect of the barbecued and processed meat? So usually when we have something like a sausage, right, it's both processed and barbecued, what do we combine it with? Something like a white bun. That's not going to help us, right? But what could we combine it with?
Olive oil.
I know. Good guess.
All right.
Good guess. Close. What if we combined it with a salad? Well, the salad contains all kinds of plant nutrients that are actually going to bind onto those potentially cancer-causing compounds and help your body to excrete them. So the idea is whenever you're treating yourself and you're going to eat your barbecued meat or your processed meat, make sure you have some kind of leafy greens or some kind of other green vegetable alongside it, because that's going to help protect your body from some of the potentially cancer-causing compounds that you've got in there. Okay, now another favorite, chips. Chip lovers in the audience? Yeah, everybody, right? Chips are good, very tasty. Couple problems with chips. The one I'm going to focus on is the salt content. So chips, of course, are very high in salt, which contains sodium. And sodium isn't so great for us because it's a risk factor for high blood pressure. And high blood pressure is a risk factor for heart disease, which is the leading killer. So we all want to be mindful of our salt or sodium intakes. Chips, of course, are going to be one of those foods where we're going to get quite a bit of sodium. So when you eat your chips, what can you do to minimize this? Well, sometimes people like to eat chips with salsa. Salsa, or tomatoes and vegetables in general, are very high in potassium. And the fact is, the more potassium you eat, the more sodium your body excretes in your urine. So whenever you're eating something salty like chips, again, make sure you got those vegetables alongside it, because you're going to absorb less of that salt. It's going to go right through you. It's going to have less of an impact on your health. Now, when I say potassium, I know everybody thinks immediately of bananas, right? Bananas are like the most famous fruit for potassium content. But in fact, the number one vegetable or fruit for potassium content is actually avocados. So it's also not a bad idea to dip your chips in guacamole, because again, you're going to be getting a lot of potassium, and then you're going to be excreting more of that sodium that you don't want. Okay, so I hope that that's helped you guys see a few ways that you can take some of your treats and make them a little bit healthier for you. While we're on the topic of dietary sodium, which is a topic that is near and dear to me, I want to play a little game. Because generally all of us consume too much sodium. Even if you're watching your sodium intake, it's really hard to keep your intakes where they should be. So we're going to play this little game, Price is Right style. So as you know in the Price is Right, at the end there's a showcase, and the contestants have to guess as close to the price as possible without going over. We're going to do the same thing, except with dietary sodium. So I'm going to show you your showcase, which is basically a meal, and I want to take some guesses from the audience of how much sodium do you think is in that meal. Guess as close as you can without going over. So let's take a look at the showcase, and then Victoria's going to go around and take some of your guesses. All right, so here's your showcase. So you have a hamburger, you have some fries, and you have a coleslaw. Now keep in mind, the daily recommendation for sodium is 1,500 milligrams. How much sodium do you think is in this meal?
Hands up if you'd like to guess.
Anybody?
Anyone want to guess? Right here. 3,000 first guess.
Okay.
What about you, sir? 1,350, so just under. I'm going to take this guess here. 1,500, he thinks it's the same. Should we take a couple more?
Let's take a couple more.
Sure. I'm going to come down the center aisle here. What about you? 2,500. And in the second row here, what do you think, sir? 8,500. Wow. Okay.
Maybe one more up here.
One more. Where was it?
4,500.
And 3,500. Most people are saying over. Most people are saying over.
Okay, let's take a look. So if we start with the hamburger alone is going to give you your day's worth of sodium. Okay? Just one hamburger, day's worth gone. Don't eat anything else till the next day. Fries, another 884 milligrams. Okay, we are definitely inching up there. And let's see if we throw in the coleslaw, 382. When we add it all up together, whoops, we come to a grand total of 2,780. So I think this lady right here that said 2,500.
Was that you there?
I think she was the closest. So she goes home with the showcase, which is too much sodium, so you probably don't want it.
The knowledge to not do that.
Exactly. All right, so moving along. I want to spend a couple minutes this afternoon talking about probiotics because they're constantly in the news. We see celebrities endorsing these products, and I want to answer for you, are these products worth the hype? Because there's so much confusion. The first, maybe we should ask the question, what are probiotics? To put it really, really simply, probiotics are good bacteria. Now I feel like we've all been raised to think of bacteria as being a bad thing, right? You hear the word bacteria, you think, ugh, it's gonna make me sick, this is not good. But in fact, not all bacteria are bad. A lot of bacteria are good. And in fact, we need bacteria in order to survive. In fact, because bacteria is so essential to our survival, we all carry some bacteria around inside of us. And I have a question for you guys. How much bacteria do you think the average person has inside of them? Raise your hand if you think you have half a pound of bacteria inside of you. You people? Raise your hand if you think you have 1 pound of bacteria inside of you. And raise your hand if you think you have 4 pounds of bacteria inside of you. You guys are good. 4 pounds. So imagine that. Right now, inside of you are 4 pounds of bacteria. And you couldn't survive without those bacteria. You can think of them kind of as being like their own organ, right? They are very essential to our survival and how our body functions. Now, within that 4 pounds that's inside of us, we have both good bacteria and we have bad bacteria. And the idea is that when these two things become unbalanced, we become sick, right? So too much bad bacteria makes us sick, more good bacteria you have, the harder it is for bad bacteria to multiply and make you sick. So for thousands of years, one way that people have increased their intake of good bacteria and maintained a proper balance is by eating fermented foods. And it's interesting, if you look around the globe, there are all different cultures have different fermented foods that they traditionally consume, right? So if you're in Germany, people eat sauerkraut. If you're in the UK, people eat fermented cheeses that would give them that good bacteria. If you're in Russia, people drink fermented milk, kefir. If you're in Korea, people eat fermented cabbage called kimchi. And if you're in El Salvador, they eat the same thing except they call it cordito. So the idea is that everybody traditionally ate these foods. But these days, if you go to the grocery store and say you buy something like sauerkraut, this sauerkraut probably has been heat treated. It's probably been on a shelf for a long time. The probability that you're going to be getting good bacteria in it is slim to none. Now there are products that people are coming out with, they're putting this good bacteria in, and any product that says on its label probiotic is going to have that benefit. But here's the problem. These different probiotic products contain different types of bacteria. Different types of good bacteria have different health benefits. So one product might have benefits for your immune system. Another product might have benefits that might increase regularity. So these are two vastly different health benefits. The two products are designed for these two different benefits, but the catch is the consumer doesn't know what product offers which benefit because they're actually not allowed to advertise that on their product. So if you want to know, so the question is, are these products worth it? The truth is it depends. It depends on you, it depends on what benefit you're looking for, and it depends on what product you're buying. So I became very intrigued by this question, and I spent about a year looking at all the products that are available, evaluating all the evidence on those products to see, what benefits can people expect to get. And I'm not going to walk through all of that with you this afternoon. If you want information on the different products, I'd refer you to my website, thatnutritiongirl.com, where you can find the guide that we created showing you what products have what benefits. And this is one way to get good bacteria inside of you. But what if you don't buy into this? What if you're like, you know what? Probiotic yogurts are too expensive. I don't believe it. I don't want to buy it. What else can you do to promote a good balance of good and bad bacteria? Well, there's something you can do. See, keep in mind, bacteria are living. And they're hungry, and they need to eat too. And they basically eat what you eat. So every time you eat, you're not just feeding yourself, you're also feeding that 4 pounds of bacteria that live inside of you. And different bacteria have different food preferences. So let's look at what different bacteria prefer. Good bacteria, they like to eat fruits and vegetables and whole grains, lots of fiber. Whenever you're eating these foods, you're feeding your good bacteria, and it's going to make it easier for them to survive and to flourish. But what about bad bacteria? What do they like to eat? Well, they like to eat processed food and animal products and animal fat and all that lovely kind of stuff. So if you need another piece of motivation for why fruits and vegetables are good for you, keep in mind those 4 pounds of bacteria that are inside of you, they want to eat fruits and vegetables too. So feed them good stuff, and you'll keep the good guys flourishing, and hopefully that will keep the bad guys at bay. All right, so probably the question that I get the most from people is, what's the key to healthy eating, right? If you had to boil it all down to one thing, what is it that people need to know? And the truth is, there really is no secret or there's no information that we're hiding somewhere. To me, healthy eating is fundamentally about balance. If you remember nothing else from today's presentation, I think the most important message I can leave with you today is the idea that when you sit down and you have a plate in front of you and you're choosing what to put on that plate, ideally, you want to fill about half of that plate with fruits and vegetables. Then you want to fill about a quarter with carbohydrate, could be bread, rice, pasta, potatoes. And then you want to fill the other quarter with protein. It could be beans, it could be meat, it could be nut, it could be fish. This is the most important thing. Balance. It's really this simple. I've spent years studying nutrition, and it all comes back to the same old message: balance. And balance can look a number of different ways. And sometimes life isn't ideal, right? We're not always going to be able to fill half of our plate with fruits and vegetables. But even when you're eating something like a sandwich, maybe you don't have those proportions right, but you still want to strive to make sure you've got vegetables, carbohydrate, and protein all together. If you combine those three elements in every meal, you're going to feel satiated, you're going to feel full, and you're going to have what you need to carry on with your day. And at breakfast, ideally, because most people, you could eat half your plate vegetables at breakfast if you want, but a lot of people don't like to do that. So at breakfast, you can combine half carbohydrates and half protein. So it could be something like a piece of toast with peanut butter, toast giving you the carbs, peanut butter giving you the protein. You could have an egg with some fruit or something, tons of different ways, but this is the framework that I would say to strive for. And the reason I like to use balance as a framework for healthy eating is because I really believe you can find balance anywhere. You can even find balance here at the CNE. So I went over to the food building a couple days ago and I thought, can you eat healthy here? Can you find a balanced meal in the CNE food building? And here's what I found. Pita Pit is an obvious choice. They even advertise themselves as being healthy. But I would argue, if you go to Pita Pit and you only fill your pita with vegetables, that's not ideal. You want to make sure you got vegetables in that pita, and you want to make sure you have protein too, and then your pita is going to give you the carbohydrate. You got those three elements present, you're good to go. Harvey's. You can get their grilled chicken sandwich. It might be a little high in sodium, but you got the protein, you've got the buns, and you can put a ton of vegetables on there. Again, that balance, you can find that there. Falafel. Falafel is going to give you protein. Again, the carbohydrate, loaded up with vegetables. There's your balance. Even Mr. Greek, again, a little higher on the sodium, but you get your pita with the carbs, protein from your meat, and tons of vegetables. You can make that balance. And finally, the Bug Bistro. Well, meat is problematic, not only for its effect on our personal health, but its effect on the environment, right? Whenever we make choices, our food choices, we can't just consider ourselves. We also have to consider, our world and our environment and the effects that our food choices has on that. And that's why bugs are becoming an interesting source of protein, because they're a very sustainable source of protein that doesn't cause the same kind of carbon dioxide emissions that other types of protein cause. But what I would argue is if you decide to eat at the Bug Bistro, you still have to find balance. So bugs, they might be in that protein component, but you got to eat your bugs with some vegetables and some carbohydrate. Again, maintain that balance. Bugs alone are not a meal. So that's the first principle. I think the most important thing when it comes to healthy eating is balance. The second principle is to know yourself. So I've given you here a framework to work with, but everyone's ideal diet is different. And it's a matter of experimenting and figuring out what works for you. So use this as a starting point and tailor it to your life. My third principle comes to portion size, and I do want to point out that two of my top three principles are borrowed from Plato. These are not things I came up with, these are like universal principles of moderation and healthy eating. And portion size is a bit of an issue for us these days for a number of reasons. We are all kind of, we all kind of like to overeat. But the question is, why? Why do we overeat? Well, in order to understand why, I want you to think about cavemen. Think about what life was like for cavemen. In their environment, life or death depended entirely upon whether they got enough food for survival. So as a result of this, our brains are designed in such a way that when we eat, this neurochemical called dopamine gets released in our brain, and that makes us feel really good. And the reason our body releases that in our brain is because it wants to reward us for eating so that we'll eat again and continue to survive. Because imagine if food didn't make you feel good. Nobody would bother to eat, and then everyone would just die. So our body rewards us for finding food, and this works very, very well in the caveman's food environment. So in the caveman's food environment, food is scarce, right? He has to go out and hunt whatever he wants. So if he's really, really lazy, he can eat something like grass. And grass contains some energy. It's mostly fiber. He's not going to get too much energy out of there, so his body is just going to give him a little bit of dopamine, not too much. But what if the caveman goes out and, he forages and he finds an apple? Well, the apple contains a little more energy, so his brain is going to reward him by releasing a little more dopamine. So this works very well in the caveman's food environment because it motivates him to go out and find those more energy-dense foods. But how does this work in a modern day food environment where food is overly plentiful? Well, we can eat an apple, and when we eat that apple, we get a little bit of dopamine, but then we can also eat donuts, which contain more energy. And what happens in our brain when we eat those donuts? We get lots of dopamine and feel really good for a little while. So this is where our brains are just, we're built for a different kind of environment where food is scarce, and that's why we overeat, and that's why it's so important to monitor your portion sizes, because we're really wired to overeat, but we have to control ourselves. Okay, the fourth principle is structure. I really believe that skipping meals will always set you up to overeat later in the day. It's so important to either have 3 meals a day or to have 3 meals and 2 snacks. Find a structure that works for you and stick with it, because any deviation from that structure is always just going to lead you to be overeating later in the day, because the body likes structure. Okay, 5th principle is respect your taste buds. Let me explain what I mean by this. I want you all to think about how tasty almonds are on an empty stomach when you're really, really hungry. How do they taste? Pretty good, right? Pretty good. They have like a nice kind of flavor profile that you can appreciate when you're really hungry. But now think about how almonds taste after you've eaten something like cake or whatever your favorite treat is. Now, how do almonds taste? Not so good, not so appetizing, right? This is what I mean by respect your taste buds. The idea is, at every meal, you want flavor intensity to crescendo. That's why dessert comes at the end of the meal, right? Because if we ate dessert first, then we can't appreciate the more subtle tastes of fruits and vegetables and those sorts of things. So the idea is respect your taste buds, leave the dessert for the end of the day, and definitely that's why you don't want to start your day off with an intense flavor hit like this, because you're only going to want more and more of this later in the day, right? And the final principle of healthy eating is to make treats treats. I totally think that it's fine to treat yourself sometimes. It's just a matter of making sure that you're not treating yourself constantly. And I think that a day like today at the CNE is a perfectly good time to treat yourself for a couple of reasons. One, you probably don't come to the CNE every day. And 2, it only comes once a year, right? And then 2, you're probably going to be walking around more on a day like today than you are on other days. So the probability that you're going to be able to burn off the treat that you eat is higher. So today's the kind of day where you can treat yourself, and I just have to say, when preparing this presentation, I was reading some of the history of the treats at the CNE. They have a lovely website with all kinds of historical stories about treats at the CNE. So if you're into that kind of thing, I recommend you check that out. But that basically brings me to the end of today's talk, but I want to quickly recap through the highlights of what I hope you guys will take away. So the first thing we talked about is how you should always combine your vegetables with fat. That's how you're going to be able to absorb the most nutrients from what you're eating. The second lesson we learned is that if it tastes too good to be true, it probably is. Third, we looked at ways to make unhealthy foods healthier. So it's okay to treat yourself. You can eat the unhealthy foods, but think about how to make the big picture of your diet minimize the effects of those foods. We talked about good and bad bacteria and ways that you can maintain the right balance inside that 4 pounds you carry around with you. And finally, we emphasized that balance is really the key to healthy eating. And every once in a while, yes, you can treat yourself, such as today. All right, well, that's my website if anybody wants more information. Thank you so much. You guys have been a great audience, and I'm happy to take some questions. I should mention I can't give any medical advice or anything like that, but any general health questions or nutrition and food questions you have, I'm more than happy to answer.
So thank you very much to our special guest, Dr. Mary Scorbatopoulos. And as Mary did mention, she has set aside a bit of time now if you do have a question that you want to ask or something that came up during the demo that you're curious about. So feel free to come to the front. She'll be doing a small meet and greet here at the front of the stage. And thank you so much for joining us. She's up again at 5 o'clock if you want to get some more information or if you want another chance to see the presentation. Thank you so much for coming, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon at CNE.
She wants the questions taped too, right?
What?
Does she want the questions taped too?
We should have just done the questions so that
Yeah, that's what I thought they were gonna do.
that's how they did Jamie Kennedy's too. And I wanted to hear them.
Yep. Patience. So, that's good enough.
So nice.
Are you photophobic?
What?